Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide, a reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that when President Roosevelt contracted polio at the age of 30, he built his own wheelchair by using a dining room chair and bicycle wheels? Learn about FDR and his 15 New Deal plans called Alphabet Soup and how they were implemented during the Great Depression. Cozy up to the radio for a fireside chat as FDR found a way to talk to the public and calm their fears during World War II.
I want you to picture the most powerful man on the planet, the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world. Now, look down at his legs. Hidden beneath his trousers, locked around his calves and thighs, are 10 pounds of heavy steel braces.
Wow.
Without them, he collapses. He cannot stand. He can't take a single step on his own.
That creates such a visceral image, doesn't it? I mean, we're so used to seeing the statues, the face on the dime, these, stoic portraits.
Exactly. But the physical reality of Franklin Delano Roosevelt was incredibly fragile.
And yet, this is the man who essentially invented the modern presidency.
He led the United States through the two biggest existential threats of the 20th century, the Great Depression and World War II, all while hiding that physical fragility from the American public.
That deception, or, well, maybe we should call it performance, is really at the heart of what we're getting into today.
It's a fascinating contradiction.
It is. You have this figure projecting immense global strength while fighting a private battle that would have, it would have absolutely broken most people.
So today we are doing a deep dive into FDR, the 32nd president, the only president to serve 4 terms. But our mission isn't just a biography. We're not just going to list dates and elections.
No, because you can read a Wikipedia page for that.
Yeah.
We want to understand the mechanics of his resilience.
Okay.
We want to unpack that alphabet soup of his policies.
Which were way more controversial than people remember.
Exactly. And we need to understand how this rich kid from New York transformed into the voice of the working class.
And the sources we're pulling from are fantastic. We've got biographies, historical summaries of the New Deal, and some really intimate personal accounts of his family life and his illness.
What struck me most, in reviewing the material is how much his personal trauma informed his political policy. You just can't separate the man in the wheelchair from the man in the Oval Office.
Well, let's start with the man before the wheelchair, because the contrast is, honestly, it's shocking.
Oh, yeah.
If you look at FDR's early life, privilege doesn't even begin to cover it.
It was a completely insulated bubble. Born in 1882, Hyde Park, New York. An only child, and his mother, Sarah, focused on him with an intensity that, it bordered on obsession well into his adulthood.
I read that he didn't even go to a real school until he was 14.
Tutors and governesses. He traveled to Europe every single year. By the time he was a teenager, he was fluent in German and French, not because he was in a language lab, but because he was, summering in the Alps.
It's the classic patrician path. Groton Prep School, Harvard, Columbia Law. Marries his cousin Eleanor Roosevelt in 1905. They have 6 children. On paper, his life is just a straight line up.
And his early career matched that trajectory. Enters politics, and it's just easy for him. New York State Senate at 28, Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Governor of New York.
The golden boy.
He was the golden boy. He had the name, the money, the looks, the energy. He was unstoppable.
Until the summer of 1921.
And this is the moment where the biography just shifts genres. It goes from a political success story to a tragedy. He's 39 years old, vacationing at Campobello Island in Canada. He's vibrant, athletic, and then he just collapses.
The speed of it is terrifying. The sources describe it as an insidious and deadly enemy. One day he's sailing, and just days later he's paralyzed from the waist down.
Polio, infantile paralysis. The diagnosis itself was a shock because, as the name suggests, it was seen as a children's disease. For a grown man, a rising political star, to contract it was almost unheard of.
I can't even imagine the psychological toll. You're 39, you're planning your run for the White House, and suddenly you can't even go to the bathroom by yourself. The pain they describe, it sounds excruciating.
It was a grueling, agonizing fight. And this is where we see the first real spark of the FDR we come to know. He didn't accept the prognosis. He got obsessed with finding a cure. So in 1924, he hears about a resort in Warm Springs, Georgia, with these mineral waters.
And typical FDR, he doesn't just visit, he buys the place.
He spent 2/3 of his personal fortune, about $200,000 back then, which is a fortune to buy this rundown resort. He turned it into a rehabilitation center for polio patients.
But it wasn't just about the water. I was looking at the details on how he actually got her around. I mean, the world in the 1920s was not ADA compliant.
Not at all. No ramps, narrow doors. So he improvised. This is one of my favorite details because it shows his engineering mind.
Huh.
He took a common kitchen dining chair and he replaced the legs with bicycle wheels.
Wait, a dining chair with bike wheels?
Yes. It was narrow enough to fit through tight hallways, and it didn't look like a medical device, the same way a hospital wheelchair did. It was practical, but also kind of humble. This aristocrat, scooting himself around on a modified kitchen chair.
But here is the massive disconnect. While he's openly disabled among other patients at Warm Springs, he's also orchestrating one of the biggest cover-ups in political history.
He was terrified that the American public would view a crippled man, and that was the language of the time, as weak. So he developed a system.
Right. If he had to appear in public, he would wear those heavy steel braces. He would grip the podium until his knuckles were white just to hold himself upright.
And the walking he did wasn't really walking, was it?
No, it was pure theater.
Pure theater. He would lean heavily on a cane with one arm and grip the arm of his son or an aide with the other. And he would swing his hips to move his legs forward. It took immense upper body strength, total concentration. He was sweating through his suits, but smiling the whole time, pretending it was effortless.
And Eleanor was really the backbone behind the scenes here.
She absolutely was. I mean, he almost didn't go back to politics. He thought his life was over.
Yeah.
But Eleanor pushed him. She said that the children's natural acceptance of his disability was what helped him. She said, the perfect naturalness with which the children accepted his limitations helped him tremendously in his own acceptance of them.
So he returns. The golden boy is now the man in the chair, but the public doesn't know it. He wins the presidency in 1932. And talk about bad timing.
Or maybe perfect timing.
Right. He walks straight into the Great Depression. The country is flatlining. Unemployment's at 25%.
The banking system is collapsed. People are literally starving.
And this is where we get the famous New Deal. I think most of us learned this in high school. It's just a list of acronyms. The alphabet soup.
It's so easy to gloss over them as just government programs, but we need to stop and really look at what these were. This was a radical reimagining of what the federal government was supposed to do.
Okay, so let's pull a few of these out of the soup because the scope is wild. Take the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps.
This is a great example. It wasn't just, here's a check. It was mobilization. They took young, unemployed men out of the cities, sent them into the wilderness. They planted billions of trees, built state parks, fought forest fires. It was about saving the environment and saving these men's morale.
Then you have the WPA Works Progress Administration.
The infrastructure backbone. If you drive over a bridge today or walk into a post office with one of those beautiful murals or use the classic high school stadium, there's a good chance the WPA built it. They hired millions of people to physically build the country.
But then you get the AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Administration. And this one honestly baffles me.
Yeah, it's the most controversial one, for sure.
Explain the logic here. Because as I understand it, the government was paying farmers not to grow food and actually destroying crops at a time when people were in breadlines.
It sounds so cruel, doesn't it? But it was an economic desperation move. Farm prices had crashed so hard that it cost more to harvest the crops than to sell them.
So food was rotting in the fields anyway.
Exactly. The AAA tried to artificially raise prices by reducing supply so that farming could become a viable business again. It was this brutal calculus. Stabilize the market to save the industry, even if it meant destroying food during a famine.
Wow. Just highlights how broken the system was. And then you have the TVA Tennessee Valley Authority.
Bringing electricity to the rural South? I mean, that was basically bringing the 20th century to people who were living in the 19th.
And the FSA, the MYA for youth jobs, and of course, the Social Security Act, which created the safety net we still debate today.
When you look at the list, CCC, WPA, AAA, TVA, FSA, NYA, Social Security, it is overwhelming. And that was the point. FDR was just throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck.
You know, it's interesting because the government wasn't the only institution trying to figure this out. The sources touched on a parallel development that I hadn't really connected before.
You think of the religious response.
Right. The notes mention that during this exact same period, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, under their president, Heber J. Grant, they launched their own welfare program.
It provides such a fascinating counterpoint.
Right.
While FDR is building a federal safety net, you have this religious institution building a private system based on a slightly different philosophy. Their whole goal was helping people help themselves.
So it wasn't just a handout.
No, the emphasis was on work and self-reliance. But the fact that both the federal government and a major church were launching these massive welfare systems at the same time tells you everything about the 1930s. The old way of neighbor helping neighbor just wasn't enough anymore.
So FDR has the machinery of the New Deal running. He's re-engineering the economy. But he also had to manage the psychology of the nation. He couldn't just pass laws.
Right, he had to keep people from panicking. And this is where his disability and the patience he learned from it really shines. He became the voice in the living room.
The fireside chats.
And think about the intimacy of that name. Not a State of the Union, a chat. March 5th, 1933 was the first one.
No TV, no internet, just the radio.
Families would gather around these wooden boxes in their living rooms, and FDR's voice would drift out. He wasn't shouting like the dictators in Europe. He wasn't lecturing. He was calm. He explained a banking crisis in simple terms. He treated the listener like a partner.
He was managing the national anxiety.
Exactly. And that skill became the difference between life and death when the next crisis hit. Because the Depression was bad, but World War II was an apocalypse.
It's almost unbelievable that one president had to handle both. Pearl Harbor happens. The U.S. is attacked, and suddenly the man who couldn't walk is the commander-in-chief of the greatest military mobilization in human history.
He appoints General Eisenhower to lead the D-Day invasion. He's managing alliances with Churchill and Stalin. But I want to connect this back to the polio.
How sad.
Think about the famous quote from his first inaugural address. "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself."
It's iconic.
It is. But why did he believe that? There's a less famous quote from FDR that I think unlocks his entire psychology. He wrote, "You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You must do the thing you think you cannot do."
You must do the thing you think you cannot do.
When he said that, I don't think he was talking about fixing the banks or fighting the Nazis. I think he was talking about staring at his own legs. He had lived through the horror of his body failing him. He had faced the fear of irrelevance. He had literally dragged himself across the floor of his bedroom to build muscle.
So when he told the American people not to be afraid of the Depression or not to be afraid of Japan and Germany,
He knew what he was talking about. He was essentially saying, I have faced the worst fear imaginable, and I survived, so we can survive this. The resilience he built in that wheelchair became the backbone of the nation.
that puts a completely different spin on his leadership. It wasn't just political posturing. It was earned.
It was earned in pain.
And he gave everything he had. He died on April 12, 1945, of a stroke, just months into his fourth term.
It's the final tragedy. The war was practically won. But he didn't live to see VE. Harry Truman had to finish the job.
So we're left with this legacy. A man who couldn't walk, leading a nation that felt crippled. Such a powerful narrative.
It is. But before we wrap up, I want to pose kind of a difficult question. I've been thinking about this whole masking aspect, the hidden wheelchair, the fake walking.
Dylan.
In our modern world, we claim to value authenticity above all else, right? We want our leaders to be transparent. We have HD cameras documenting their every move. If a president trips on the stairs today, it's a meme in 5 seconds.
Oh, absolutely. FDR could never get away with that deception today.
But here's the provocation. Was the deception necessary? If the American public in 1932 had seen FDR being lifted out of a car like a helpless invalid, would they have trusted him to save the economy? Or did they need the illusion of physical strength to feel safe?
That is a tough one. You're asking if the performance of strength is just as important as the actual strength.
Exactly. Could a modern leader hide a vulnerability like that? Probably not. But maybe we've lost something by demanding to see every flaw. Maybe the mask FDR wore wasn't about vanity. Maybe it was his first act of service to the country. He bore the burden of the disability privately so the country wouldn't have to worry about it.
That's a thought that's going to stick with me. The idea that hiding his pain was actually a strategic part of his leadership.
It's worth chewing on.
Well, on that note, we are going to wrap up this deep dive into the man in the chair. It's a reminder that sometimes the strongest people are the ones holding themselves up by the hardest means. Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.